Call our meeting to order. Finance Committee meeting, August 1st, 3:06 in the afternoon. Public comment other than what we're going to talk about today. Seeing none, we'll move on, which is a discussion of the reserve fund. Brian, turn it over to you to sort of kick it off and lead our discussion.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman, and everyone for coming in today to continue this meeting from last week. We do have John Lemieux from Vertex, who is our OPM here, to go through and address any of the questions that had come up since the last meeting and then over the weekend, and then hopefully that'll answer all and address any of the concerns that you had so that we can maybe hopefully move forward with a vote on a request from the reserve fund. So okay. I will actually turn it over to John from Vertex to take you through some of those questions. Yes?
Mr. Chairman, actually, or Brian.
Yeah.
Would you mind just, I feel like I'm a little bit behind the curve on the solution here is to transfer a fund,
Okay, so the solution
is... All I remember from the last meeting was that the bids came in $1 million greater than the expectation. So
sure.
The solution, I'd like to be educated on first.
Okay, so the solution was in the packet from last week. There was 4 options presented. 3 were not really that great, and 1 was what we came up with, which was option 2, which is essentially what we're going to do is to, in order to sign the contract by the required date, or else we would have to rebid, we are going to essentially use all of the money for the furniture, fixture, and equipment, and all the remaining monies for the contingencies, plus asking for an amount from the reserve fund to cover the $1.273 million shortfall, which will allow us to sign the contract, to lock the pricing in, and then move forward to begin the project. At town meeting, I've made a recommendation to the town manager that we transfer approximately $350,000 from the insurance line item of the general fund budget, okay, because we realized substantial savings in our property and casualty insurance this year. And then, excuse me, I've made a recommendation that we fill the remainder by asking for your support to go to take money from the capital stabilization, which has about $1.5 million in it. The amount we would need would be approximately $950,000. Once we move put this all together, with the recommendation to the town manager at the April town meeting. Depending, one of the funding sources could be free cash. Depending on where free cash falls, we either fully replenish everything taken out of the capital stabilization, or we fund a portion of it with a commitment to finish funding it at hopefully the following year. So that's the recommendation that we had made last week. That's the recommendation that will actually, I believe, be going to the board as well for Wednesday night for their consideration as well. Okay?
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So you're also...
Okay, got it.
Sorry, I have a little cold.
Okay. Good.
Hi.
So it's John?
Yes, John Lemieux from Vertex, your OPM. Do you...
So, John, I think we have the presentation you made to the Board of Selectmen.
Yes.
Which we talked about, and hopefully you have a set of questions that I forwarded along to the town manager.
And I forwarded, I think Brian handed this out today. This is just a comparison of the filed sub-bid results. Yep. So basically, Mass General Law 149, when you bid a project, you have certain categories of work that are bid before the GC, then the GC bids everything else. So we don't have the benefit of data comparison on the rest of the project. We only have it on these line items, whereas drywall, excavation, all the other things kind of get lumped into that last number. So as you can see, the original estimate for the filed sub-bids was $5.1 million. When they first were bid, they came in just over 7, and there were a number of them that were really high. And one of them was metal fabrications, also known as miscellaneous metals, plumbing, as well as HVAC. And HVAC is really the one here that kind of pushed us over. You had almost $1 million just in that one line item. If you add up those, well, we subsequently went back, did a little bit of scope tweaking to be able to rebid those things. Commonwealth doesn't let you just go right back out to bid. You have to change something. So on metal fabrications, it was easy. There was actually a clarification that was made. We think that they were actually bidding structural steel erection, which is a different category. We made that change, and the number came down significantly. Plumbing, we took out a janitor's sink. We knew there wasn't going to be a big change in that number, but we needed to make a tweak in order to, again, to rebid. And then HVAC, there were a number of large fans that were taken out of the apparatus bay. A couple of other things changed. That brought the delta on the HVAC from $1 million over to $835. So if you look at those three items together, they total very close to the overage of the GC number was, the entire bid of about $1.4 million, 1.47 to be exact. Those numbers were carried through by all three general bidders. They carried those numbers exactly, and then they put on the rest of their bid. So this $6.583 million total is part of the 15,707 that is J&J Contractors bid. So just as a point of, I know there's a question about comparing some of the line items. Frankly, HVAC, why is it high? GGD, who is the mechanical subconsultant for KBA, for Kessel Booth, the architect, still stands by their number, despite the fact of what we saw. They're attributing it to the manufacturer in this case. You've got a building you're trying to plug into, basically, and match. So it kind of is limiting you from a manufacturing standpoint. We think the manufacturer knows that. We think the quotes were high. I mean, the difference between the filed subbidder that won this and the other filed subbidder for mechanical was less than $40,000 on a $2 million bid. So the bids were, the numbers that were out there were very tight, but the numbers they're getting from the equipment manufacturer, from the controls manufacturer, from all those places to come in and be able to match and speak with this building, I think they took advantage of the situation, plain and simple. There's no other.
Is it simple to ask the question, why don't we do a separate mechanical system for the fire station?
We could, but one of the reasons you went with a geothermal system way back when was that in the future, if you were going to do that, you can do a lot of things right now to cut this money down from that standpoint, but your long-term operating costs are going to far exceed the savings, the short-term savings you'd make from it. You went with a very expensive system for this building. It does great things for you as far as long-term operating costs. I mean, you've got wells that are going down to however many feet, using the heat and the cool from the earth to do it. We talked about chopping this up and putting univents in each room. Yes, you could save money, but at the end of the day, then you're going to have 20 or 30 individual units that you're going to be paying for filters and doing maintenance instead of plugging into this, this system you have here. So at the end of the day, the decision was made to, keep it the way that it was, and move.
But how many days in the future are we talking about a break even here? I mean, what's the operating cost for this building for the HVAC? I mean, it seems like this is, if we miss the mark by $1 million because we're trying to tie into this system, that's a lot of operating costs, right?
Well, I couldn't answer that. You'd have to get the mechanical engineer to answer that.
Are you aware whether, to follow up on what Stephen said, was there any life cycle analysis done on these two systems, or the geothermal and then an alternative system? I mean, it's a relative question given how much money we're talking about.
I can't speak to what was done 6 or 7 years ago, when they looked at that system as what should go into this building. But typically you would say yes. Of course it was at that point.
No, I think we're talking about this cover.
No, because, again, the charge originally was you have a building here, you hired the same architect, and there was a certain efficiency in that. You're building the building you chose not to build 7 years ago, essentially, and you put that building together. So when the decision was made not to build fire, it was cut. Systems were downsized a little bit,
right.
But really were made so that if you were going to connect with them someday, you could do it. And again, since this happened, this was bid essentially a month ago, 5 weeks ago. You spent close to $1 million designing this building. If the thought is that that's where you want to go with this, it's going to, it's going to take some serious redesign to go back and change these things, because now you're going to need different mechanical rooms. You're going to have to reshape the building a bit to try to do that. So we weren't told to move ahead with that, which is why we came up with the options. Because the redesign option is, crinkle up the paper and, we'll kind of start over to a certain degree for some of this.
Go ahead.
In November 2014, when the estimated cost of the project, the construction, was $14.74 million, the report to the Finance Committee and to the Board of Selectmen was that we were going to look for ways to reduce that cost through value engineering. So what happened between now and then? Did we do value engineering? Did we decide, for instance, that this was the best HVAC system, or that the size of the project as we're looking at it now, is it different than it was designed in 2008?
The program that you have right now is the program that it took 1.5 years to develop and design, so that the chief's not moving into a building that's too small the day he moves into it. So at the end of the day, if the program dictates 22,000 square feet, it's 22,000 square feet. When we talk about value engineering, we talk about what are we not putting into the building that we can't afford, the level of finishes, those kind of things. Because otherwise, you're really, to save space, to save dollars in a building like this, the only way to do a substantive review, or removal, I should say, of cost, is to lop off a bay, 2,000 square feet at a time.
Or potentially to look at a different HVAC system.
Sure, but at the end of the day, you could. You could.
I mean, it seems to me that's what was intimated would be done in November 2014, and then it wasn't done. We don't have any analysis of the life cycle of the system.
But in November of 2014, we didn't expect the HVAC system to come in $1 million higher.
Right, but we probably looked at it. It was the largest line item on this sub-bids, even the estimates, right?
Right. But at the end of the day, if it came in at the price, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So at the time, we thought...
But we were looking to get the numbers down from 14.7, not to keep them there.
Understood.
So you would probably look at the biggest line item and say maybe that's where we can make some savings.
But we were going with the thought of, again, long-term versus short-term. It's easy now to pick the high number that got blown terribly and say you should have looked there.
Well, there's only 15 items. We could have looked at all of them.
No, but we were looking at, the project has hundreds and hundreds of line items, okay, when we look at the estimate. This is a bid day estimate, so this is the only hard actual data we have from the subs, and then the rest of it is the balance between the subs and the GC. What we're operating with, from 1.5 years to now, are estimates that are issued after schematic design, estimates that are issued after design development, and then one more before we go to bid. And the one more before we went to bid, we were around the $14 million number, and then the actual bidding climate, trashed that. I mean, when folks looked to want to build the bathrooms down at Children's Beach, the number was $350,000. The bid came in at $800,000. And I'm not saying that that's even close to being realistic, but at the end of the day, nobody thought those bathrooms were going to cost that much. So, again, if I look at this item, I think you have the mechanical guys taking advantage of the way this was designed up and putting a premium on it.
We did ask the question. We asked the engineers if we went to an independent system, would it make sense? They agreed that it would cost less money, but that we would lose that amount of money and more over long-term operating costs. They didn't give us a payback period. So I can't tell you that it's 5 years or 10 years, but they did look at it, and they looked at the alternative costs, and they said it wasn't worth it. I wish I could tell you the payback period. I wish I had that number, but I don't have it. But we did ask that question, because we considered several times whether it was an independent system. And every single time we asked that question, they told us it wasn't worth it. We would pay more money long term. So,
Well,
Go ahead, John.
yeah, they should have given you a payback period.
I should have asked for a payback period.
Well, they
You're
should have
right.
given it to you anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, That's just standard procedure in any type of analysis. When someone tells me it's going to cost more or cost less, and therefore, but you're going to make it up in the operating expenses, then I want to know, all right, how quick am I going to get the payback? That's just standard in anything you do. So to me, there's an issue there that when people say something is cheaper, I want to know how much and what the payback period is. Very simple. Sorry, that's just the way I personally feel about it, and I've built a lot of buildings around the world. Okay, so I'm just telling you that. What? A question, I've got a sort of and maybe I'm getting out of sequence here a little bit. But you know what astounds me is our original estimate, and then we go out for bids, and all of a sudden the bids are different, substantially different. And so, and I want to look at our estimating system and say, what should we have done differently when we estimated it originally? I mean, if reality are the bids, and I'm having a hard time understanding that, but if reality are the bids, then how come our estimating system is so far out of whack?
So when the estimates were originally done, or the last one came in, we looked at it, I'm the guy that stood up in front of town meeting and said, I thought the factor was between 30 and 40%. I'm building a building in Situate right now, a very similar sized building, a police and fire station, 22,000 square feet. Price is $515 a square foot for construction. Yours is $707.
Yeah.
If I take that $515 and I add 40%, that's or 30%, I should say at the time, because I think that's what we did. That's $150. You're at $650. We came in at $707, and we went lower. We thought we went right in the middle. I mean, there's no science there. I mean, there was a discussion with some folks spoke to a couple of the other contractors. I know Heidi, when she was still here, spoke to Scanlon. We kind of talked a little bit, and that was the range, 30 to 40%. We went with 35. Should we have gone to 40? Yeah, if we went with 40, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. We would have asked for more money, and it would have come in where it was. The reality is we can't, I would tell you, aside from the mechanical, the plumbing, and the Miss Metals number, if you take those out, that's the 1.4 we're over. So the rest of the estimate kind of did come in the range we were expecting it. But those three items blew it out.
The question I have about who bids and who doesn't bid.
Sure.
And I think I asked this question, Brian, at the last meeting, but I think you've got some restrictions on who's allowed to bid.
We do. I can talk. Do you want me to talk about that?
Well, the only thing I wonder is that I asked at the last meeting whether we could ever get a waiver on some of those conditions, and I was told no. I didn't ask whether we ever tried to get a waiver, but the question here is we certainly have grounds for it if every time we turn around, somebody bidding on the mainland is saying, well, us doing business in Nantucket is a premium, then I would say that maybe we have grounds for getting some type of a waiver. Because everybody keeps throwing it in our face. Okay, but then give us some slack here.
I think you have two issues. The first issue is just that. The second issue is that because this project was over $10 million, you had to pre-qualify. When you pre-qualify, you're identifying the pool of bidders. Only those people that pre-qualify can bid, and then invariably that number can only get smaller. So as an example, we pre-qualified 5 GCs on this job and roughly 60 subcontractors amongst all these different trades you see here. On bid day, we got about 38 filed subbids. That's it, across all these categories. A couple of these categories, we got 1. Of all of the people that applied, of those 38 DCAM subcontractors, 2 were from Nantucket. 1 painter, 1 flooring guy. So one of your other questions was about locals. I didn't go through the, DCAM publishes their updated list monthly. You can Google it on their website. You can go through it. Not a lot of Nantucket firms. So everybody who's building here is coming. There's very few resources here. And then when you get to that $10 million mark, even if you have somebody here, they can only qualify for the size job they've done. Mm-hmm. So you may have a painter on the island, and ultimately we didn't pre-qualify him because his largest job was $50,000 or $70,000. This is a $200 and something thousand. Don't quote me on the numbers, but it was like a factor of 10. This would have been his biggest job by 3 or 4 or 5 times. So it wasn't a smart move to pre-qualify based on that. So you don't have a lot of resources here. So everybody's coming from the mainland, to do that.
So will you address the issue of the contractors that you sought out, pre-qualified? We got 3 generals to bid. 1 was disqualified. That left us with 2.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mixed the jobs. We had 8. We had 8 GCs we pre-qualified. We only got 3 bids.
And people like Scanlon, who have built a lot on Nantucket, still may be building on Nantucket. I think they've got some other projects. Didn't bid the project, and was one of them involved with the schools? I mean, are they
CTA. I'm sorry, not CTA. Brait. Brait bid. Brait was the high bid. Brait, who I thought would have been very competitive, was $1 million higher than the 15.7. They were 16.6 and change, I believe.
So what's your responsibility to, beat the bushes hard to get a fair amount of
at the end,
competition?
it's a great question. At the end of the day, we call, are you still bidding? We're still bidding. At the end of the day, they don't bid. I mean, I had a contractor 2 days before, CTA, who I'm doing 2 other projects with on the mainland. And when I said, why didn't you bid? They said, we had another bid, something we were going after hard. We didn't have time to do it. You told me a few days ago, at the end of the day, you can't put their pen to paper. Invariably what also happens too, and we heard this from a number of the subs, because we called some of the plumbers that we know when we only got 2 numbers. We said, what happened? Well, we got a job. So the problem now is, since the economy hit the skids, 07, 08, everybody got lean. All of the dead wood fell out of the construction market, the public construction market. Eastern, Peabody, Jackson, all those TLT, all those companies are gone. So people really got tighter and more efficient. And at the end of the day, if they see a job that comes, they throw a larger number at it with the idea that, hey, if we get this, great. That's what Brait did. I have no question. There is not an extra $1 million in cost between J&J number and J&J's and Brait's. They just weren't really going after it hard. So we call the folks that we know. We are in touch with the people who pre-qualify. Are you still bidding? Yes. People tell you what they want to hear. I would tell you that we probably got a 90% hit rate of people saying yes, and in the end, we didn't get 90% of bid. We got 60-something. So
are you making the argument that we should wait until there's a better construction climate, i.e. that things are a little less heated up, or are you suggesting that that's not going to happen?
No, I think it's not going to happen. I think right now, barring knowing something that's going to happen with the economy, if the economy crashed soon, would that be great for Nantucket and this? Sure, but there would still be a lag. People who have to finish their work and then get hungry again. 07, 08, everything dried up so tight that the people who did have money got some really great deals. But the problem is you will never, you always have to worry about labor. Labor always goes up. Prevailing wages go up every single year, no matter what. No matter how much you wait, they go up 2 to 5%, per annum, depending on the trade. Some trades are different than others, but those wage sheets always increase, So, and that's when we frankly spoke to the Board of Selectmen. That was the chair's concern was, one of the options was to rebid it again and see. Yes, there was a low bidder who made a mistake. That was one of your other points, DCAM. Simple, stupid mistake. DCAM certificate, update statement. It's statutory. If you don't have it, your bid is junk. It's like being 1 minute late for a 3 o'clock bid. we called the AG's office. We said, "Are you sure?" She goes, "Oh, I'm absolutely sure you can't do that. That's a protestable thing, and you'll lose." Okay, fine. But that bid delta was was $500,000. So, okay, let's rebid. Well, what's more likely in a rebid scenario? That the 15.7 is going to come down to the 15.2, or the 15.2 is going to come up to the 15.6?
He realized they left money on the table.
Right. He realized it's on the table. So, and that was, I think,
But you mentioned one of the other 8, I think you said, pre-qualified contractors. You mentioned one of the others was interested in bidding, had another deadline at the same time.
chose not
Presumably
to.
didn't have the bandwidth in their estimating department, so they chose another project.
Correct.
So they may be interested in rebidding.
Right, but you
The
may
low
lose.
bidder may be interested in bidding.
But you may
and
lose,
J.K. Scanlon's interested in bidding. They have the same issue.
or you may lose them. You may lose some of the ones that already bid. And that was what we tried to convey to the Board of Selectmen. There is no guarantee, because I'll stand here and say, could you do it? Sure. Could you come in less? Sure. Could it come in at 16 million? Yes. And what we would have to do now, those bids are stale as of this Friday. They're no good. We have to, we could ask to extend, but when you ask to extend, you also then have to, that GC has to go to each of those umpteen subs and ask them, will you extend? Because they're under no requirement to do so. If we don't extend, we're starting the pre-qualification process over again to get a new pool. Okay? And could that pool be bigger? Yes. Could that pool end up being smaller? Also, yes. So there's no guarantee here. And frankly, I'll be frank with you. I didn't think we were going to walk out of the Board of Selectmen meeting with the option they chose. I thought we were going to rebid it. They instead chose to lock in and grab the number because afraid of there's no guarantee.
Right.
So one of the issues that surfaced, thanks to work that Stephen did, was some of the other comps on the Cape, and as well as Oak Bluffs.
Oak Bluffs was opened about months ago. I'm not quite sure when. I spoke to the OPM from that project. It's a modular project, not conventionally built. You can't really compare.
No, but why can't we do a project similar to what they've done? I mean, fundamentally, it seems to me that what we're not going to make up a lot of money just nibbling around the edges. I mean,
You're
if
correct.
you want to do this project and do it for closer to the original estimate or less money, it's got to be rethought, even if you have to live with the mechanical systems. I mean, we've got brick. Could we use shingle? There are all of these sort of questions
Sure.
that are out there that.
But none of, I will tell you that, yes, each of those things, we had to change one area of brick to shingle for HDC, the connection piece of the building. At the end of the day, I think it was a $40,000 or $50,000 difference. You could take all the brick off this building and you still have over $1 million problem. And that's the issue here. So, you talk about modular. You could go modular, but that is a completely different procurement model, and it won't be built like this is built. What you have to be, if you want, the question becomes, do you want the level of fit and finish that's in this building in the fire station? Originally, the answer to that question was yes. You have the same architect, they kept the same details. I mean,
No, I think the original question was no, because we didn't approve it the first time round. And
So-
the architect, if I am correct, was never paid to update their plans this go-round. They were just pulled off the shelf. I think that's what you said, and I'm pretty sure that that's how it happened. So, I mean,
listen, the whole building was reprogrammed. I mean, you had the institutional knowledge, you had the details from this building, so when you look at the roof line, it's the same details. I mean, from that standpoint, there was a lot of, it wasn't just let's take this out and dust it off. Otherwise, this would have gone to bid, 6 months ago, if it was just that scenario.
I understand, but the first go-round, when the money was approved at the original town meeting for this building, there was no money ever programmed to the architect to update those plans. They did takeoffs from the 2008 or 2007 plans. And it was only after money was then approved that they got in and started to update the plans. I'm pretty sure of that because I sat on this committee at the time, and you two guys were on this committee, and we have a selectman here who might remember it as well. So, a question, that Stephen asked, and I think is on a lot of our minds and John's mind, is, how seriously, did we go back and really look at this building? And I think if you were to say to the community, do they want a building with fit and finish similar to the police station, that you probably would struggle to get 50% of the people to say that was acceptable. Could be wrong about that, but I mean, it's, and now we're looking at whatever, $17 million, and, it's a big number. So, anyway.
Can
You
I just want
please
to
go
refine
forward.
that a little bit, because Steve did some work, and he looked at Chatham, Brewster, Hyannis, Oak Bluffs, and the average, in this, on a per square foot basis, this is now 165% of the average of the four. And
Yeah, but
in what?
But the numbers-
I thought I heard you saying, but I wasn't sure. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Sure.
I just want to understand. The difference there, the two things that I've heard so far is that, number one, it's the way we've designed the building. You mentioned Oak Bluffs was a modular, and this is not. So the way you design the building is one thing, and then the second thing is the cost of doing business on Nantucket. Is that fair is that a fair representation of that 165% that we're looking at?
Yeah, but I do think you need to, it's not 165%, first of all, because this 165% is the total project budget divided by the square footage, that 843 number, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You can't compare that because the Oak Bluffs number is construction only. You need to compare a number of 707, which is your cost per square foot for construction, not 843. You can't use...
Their total appropriation was $8.3 million. Ours is going to be $18.3 million. So that's total cost. That's the total amount they went to their taxpayers for.
So these are all total appropriation numbers.
Correct. Those are all total appropriation numbers, including project manager fees, including architectural fees, including contingencies.
I spoke to the OPM at Oak Bluffs this morning. I was under the impression the construction cost was just over $8 million.
That's not right.
Okay.
So why didn't we, in this value engineering process where we, again, I haven't heard any substantive changes that we made from the 2008 plan, but value engineering to reduce the cost from $14.7 million is what we told voters we were going to do before the April 2015 town meeting. And it doesn't seem like we took a hard look at even so much as the HVAC system, let alone looking at a modular building, a new design that would allow for the same square footage, the same utility, but at a much lower cost. Is that accurate?
Again, I don't have the estimates, the three estimates here to tell you. Whatever the charge was initially at the first town meeting, okay, that got the, that got the original appropriation going. Yeah, please.
So some of the changes from that last town meeting and today, we took out a training room. We shrunk the footprint. So we took a training room out. HVAC, the apparatus floor had actually two systems. They had an underfloor system and an air system. We took the whole air system out altogether. So that was a substantial change in the HVAC system to reduce the cost. I don't think what else we did.
Again,
We shrunk the footprint. We took
were-
the locker room on the second floor and we put it in the basement to bring the footprint smaller, because basement space is cheaper than second floor, so I brought the footprint down. We chopped every square footage we could off of it.
We were tracking around 14 million. Again, the budget that I showed the day of the last town meeting was 14.4. 14.4 was our target number. We had contingencies on top of that. 14.4 is when we were getting our estimates back from our estimators, is what we were shooting for, to be better than that number. If that last estimate came in at 14.5, 14.6, we would not have put the project out to bid. We did not want to put the project out to bid to be put in this situation. I don't like standing here having to defend this. 9 times out of 10, it works. This time it did. And again, I can't speak to the specifics about the HVAC system. Again, I think they're raking you over the coals for it. It's easy to say that that's a place we could pull some money out. Now, of course, it's almost $1 million. So the question becomes, if you want to do that, we can do that. But there is no guarantee that once we do that, and we don't want to affect the program either. If we're all set on the 22,000 square foot building, we could be back here, and you might save 400,000. Again, it's just pulling a number.
So setting HVAC aside and understanding that for the April 2015 meeting we were at 14.7, but we told voters we were trying to get lower. I guess you're saying the number we were trying to hit was 14.4. That doesn't seem substantial, but maybe that's what it was. And then we went over, and then we needed $2 million. So we needed from 15 to 17 million, and now we're back to ask for more money again. But at any point in that process, did we look at doing what Oak Bluffs was doing and do a modular building?
We never looked at modular. We did not.
Does modular work?
The reason why modular works is because the labor to build the box isn't prevailing wage. There's no rocket science to it. It's built in somebody's facility. You do not have to pay prevailing wage to carpenters, laborers, all of that. Once it comes on site, you do. But when it's being built, you don't.
I don't think we're asking if it's sufficient from your standpoint as a structure, not
Okay.
do they work. I mean,
Well, of course it
yeah.
works.
Like, is it satisfactory to the fire station, to the people who are using it? Does it make a difference? Can you even tell? 'Cause
I'll be frank, in the fire stations I've done, we have one in design right now that's using modular for the apparatus bay portion only. The other 4 or 5 that we are doing or have done are all doing conventional built.
So
Because the problem with modular is, depending on, you open the catalog as, this is what we want, it's a price. Everything you add to it. There isn't going to be a modular building that comes with cedar shingles on it.
Yeah.
That's an add
No,
at the
but-
end. I'm just using it as an example.
Right. Yeah.
But it gets built up from there. So it becomes a question of design, the pieces to put it together. It's a different process in how it gets put together. Do you do it just for the apparatus bays? Do you do it for the offices?
It's got to meet HDC too, so we're a little unique out here. We have to have special, they want special details that.
well,
I'm sure we can
there's
get it.
modular houses built all
There is,
over.
you're right,
Nantucket.
that's true. You're right.
Yeah.
And we'd have to re-engineer it too. So what's the KBB number? $500,000?
that seems like a pittance when you're talking about the difference for a similarly sized facility is $10 million cheaper in Oak Bluffs.
KBA numbers for $500,000 is only to redesign it, right?
Those are redesigned from previous.
That was a ballpark.
Then we
number.
have to go back out to bid for whatever we were doing, which means that we have all our final sub-bids to redo. We have our general contractor bid to redo, and we've got the bond work. So we
For a bite at $10 million, I'll do it. I mean, that's what we're talking about, I think.
For what?
$10 million.
Yeah, the $10 million.
Down to $10 million.
No, but Oaks Bluff was delivered for 8 and change all in, and it's substantially the same size,
But-
and it's on an island.
When was it bid? We're talking about $8 million like it's today dollars. It's at least a year or two old.
I totally
So-
understood, but
so
what
put,
you're
put 20%.
but what you're saying is that
Even
our
it-
problem is, confined in our HVAC, and I think we're talking about a totally different approach to it that says even if you're going to bid this outrageous amount of money for HVAC, we've changed the building elsewhere so that we're closer to our 14 or, one would like to think even less.
So if you built, if you don't change the HVAC system and you build the whole building modular, it's still a $2 million system. That's just
Right.
Right. So it requires, if you're doing this, more than one.
So, John, go ahead, and then I have a question for the chief.
I'm curious about something here that you said, which is, you said that one of the reasons that the modular building is cheaper is because it comes modular, and as a result of it, the labor to put it together for as much as they can do does not observe the wage
Correct.
structure. Now, the state apparently appears to be okay with that then.
Yes.
They're the ones that require us to observe the union wages. Okay? Now, but they're okay with modular.
They are. Because the whole thing, you never get the whole thing done.
Well, I
It doesn't
understand
get
that,
dropped.
but-
There's still a good chunk of work that gets done
Yeah.
in the field.
But you're saying, though, that that can be a significant cost savings.
It's a big reason for the cost savings, sure. Because at the end of the day, you wouldn't, you still want, if this building was going to have 3/4 plywood sheathing on the outside, you want that, you want the modular to have it,
Let me ask you another question, and this, I'm putting you on the spot, I know, when I ask this question, but, if you were to go back before this building was built and go back to the planning process, let's just say somebody suggested, why don't we look at modular buildings? If we're going to do a new police station, new fire station, why not look at, would you not recommend that, or would you think that that's a reasonable, at least, thing to look at, or how would you approach that?
I think it's reasonable to look at. I think the reality is it depends on what you're trying to build. At a certain level, how do you bring a box for a apparatus bay over?
The same way
It's
they
really-
did the Oak Bluffs. On a barge.
Okay, let me.
Well, I assume they did it on a barge.
No. I'm just saying is how the layout, depending on what you're building, dictates how it's going to get here, what you need to do to get it here. I know you can do it. I'm not fighting you on this. Okay, there are just different pieces to it. It wasn't looked at, and I'm not going to sit here and proclaim to be a modular expert because I'm not. I've got one project in it right now. So if you'd like more info on it,
But from your experience in looking at this, and I'm not saying you're necessarily a modular expert, but you know something about it, obviously, or you've been talking about it. So the issue is, you would think that would be something that we should look at.
you could look at it. But I will tell you that a lot of communities don't look at it for either fear of it, who are the providers that do it, because again, it's a different relationship as well. You're buying it, and there's also an architect on that end. The way the modular procurement laws work is you hire an architect to do kind of a very base level schematic and a site plan, and you go out and you put RFQs out for, hey, we're going to do a fire station, and here's our piece of land. And then you get proposals back, and those proposals are then looked at, and you say, okay, we look at them from a technical standpoint, and then we open the price envelope. From that standpoint, you kind of work together with them. So it's a different procurement. When you look up the procurement laws in Chapter 149, it's its own section because it really is a wholly different animal.
But it is legal.
Oh yeah, yeah. The golf course is doing it. My comment. They're looking at it right now.
I was going to try and make that point when you move or when you build, and I've dealt with Huntington homes. Obviously, when you have these big bays that the fire truck's going to be in, there's nothing modular about it. It's open space. So
Right.
when you bring whatever you can bring as modular, you still now have to build the walls, and it still has to be supported. And
Correct.
It doesn't seem to me, I've tried to do it, should in any way be cheaper when it comes to that part of the building. I mean, I can see the offices where there's structures and you can make pods, but the garage bays don't seem to be in any way conducive to saving money. But like you said, maybe we don't know enough about it yet.
So, a question for you. At what point in the design and estimating process that you breach the $10 million threshold that you are then required to do filed subbids? So let me rephrase the question.
When does pre-qualification get tripped?
Correct.
Okay.
So if
Yes, just the difference. The filed subbid categories you see here, 20,000. If you hit if 20,000, if any of these things are going to be estimated to be over 20 grand, they're considered a filed subbidder. They have to get their own separate bidding. Pre-qualification is 10 million. You kind of see it as you go. I mean, right off the bat, the first estimate for this thing was 12, 13 million, the old numbers, or whatever, or I should say the number that he was alluding to when we came out of the initial approval. When we came on board, it was pre-qualification from the word go. There was really no choice. You know, if you're teetering, you know, I think the Attorney General would tell you to err on the side of do it.
Right.
Because anybody can pre-qualify. You know, you're doing a $4 million job, you can pre-qualify. We've done it on smaller projects for historical preservation because DCAM has a special category of historical contracting, as an example. We go through the process.
But presumably companies wouldn't necessarily bid a public project. I mean, if people are in that business, they've pre-qualified, I would presume.
Yeah, you've got a DCAM list, and that's everybody. You're going to get a subset of that who are going to pre-qualify.
So what you're saying, everybody that's in the construction trade probably pre-qualifies with DCAM?
Two different things. Your DCAM certificate of eligibility. If I want to do public work today, my firm, we maintain it just because we like to have it as well. It's a yearly application process. Who have you done work for? You know, if a home builder on the island who's only done private work wants to get into it, he or she would need to, you know, start small. They give you a little bit, a low limit. You win some work, you get reviewed on it, your limit goes up and up and up. So when these contractors come in, for instance, for roofing was, you know, 600,000. The people who submitted, that was the estimate, the people who submitted a bid needed to show a single project limit in excess of 600,000. And when they showed us their list, we needed to make sure their aggregate, that they weren't out of room.
Gotcha. All right. Any other comments, Stephen? Did you have?
Just
Go ahead.
wanted to understand what you just, and that pre-qualification. Now, who, you know, I was looking for something which said that they had to, for instance, on a $600,000 bid or a $600,000 whatever, they would have to show that they've done other work for that amount.
Correct. So
Then how do they get started if they can never show that they've done?
You can. Have you tried to do it?
Yeah.
If you start small, and it kind of snowballs from there. No roofer, as an example, can start today and say, "I want a $500,000 limit." You'll never get it. You've got to get They've actually started a newer program for smaller businesses, which is actually nice to see, where they let them use private project experience as kind of a way to submit. You get your first approval. It might be for 100,000. Then it's 2, then it's 5, then it's $1 million. It rolls up from there.
But it seems like is there a document which says that it has to be at a certain percentage or whatever?
Sure. If you look up on the DCAM website, how to file and be certified it's all listed there.
It's all.
Yeah,
it's a state document.
Correct. And when we get their package, we just don't get the certificate. We get their update statement, which shows their last few projects with their grades from other owners. We get the resumes of their crew, of their management personnel. We see any legal proceedings. We see any lawsuits, and we get references. That's the one big. If there's one benefit you get that you don't really get with under $10 million contractor, under $10 million projects, is you get the benefit of all that info. You get to see who your superintendent's going to be. You get to see their resume. You know, and you get to call those references beforehand. And if everything checks out, they get pre-qualified and they're on the list.
You can get those references anyway. You know.
Okay. Well, the state makes you do it over $10 million.
I have a question for the chief. And this will call on you to speculate here a little bit, but are we likely to see you standing before us in the next 5 years asking for substations around the island, Wisconsin and Nantucket, to serve what's clearly a significantly increasing population?
Yes. Yeah, We've been talking about Sconset. They do about 60 calls a month out there in the summertime. We've looked over the building that we have there with the building inspector, with HDC, with some other community preservation groups. We think we can use the existing facility with some modifications to put personnel out there for seasonal months. I don't know what we're going to do about Nantucket. We do about half the amount of calls out there. It doesn't seem to justify putting personnel all the way out there, but it's something to be looked at 5+ years down the road. But
How about on
in the
the-
next 5 years, yeah, we would
How
like
about
to
on
talk
the
about.
west side of town, in closer?
Yeah, in the next couple of years, we're looking to do some work on Sconset so that we could put personnel out there for the summertime.
So if we're beginning to think more seriously about that, I know it's been a topic off and on for a while, does that suggest that we should rethink what we're doing here with this facility?
This facility fits us at exactly the number of vehicles and personnel we have close to today. So a couple of years down the road, our car volume continues to go up. This station, we would need a place to put extra personnel equipment anyways, so we were looking at future expansion going elsewhere other than the central station. So this doesn't, with Wisconsin being a possibility down the road, it doesn't mean we need any less facility or personnel
But what if we were to,
here.
say, put a facility just west of town, so it's serving that side of, the
Right.
west side of Main Street, but not clearly out to Nantucket, so pick an area,
They've talked about this a lot. I'm new here. I've been here
Yeah.
10, 11 months now. They've done extensive studies on this, and this is what they came up with. They came up with having a single station here is their best option. Certainly that could be an argument, that having 2 stations at different sides of the town are a possibility. I know they looked at that very seriously for a long time, but the experts all came up with this as being the best solution.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just writing on what David's question was. I remember that coming up at the time. I remember there were some people on that committee that was looking at it who favored, rather than one large, looking at 1 or 2 small, because of just what you're talking about.
Sure.
And I don't know that I ever came away from that with a clear understanding of why this was chosen as opposed to that type of having sort of a separate stations. But I know that it was debated, and I think it was kind of I got the impression it was pushed through to go with one central thing, because that seemed to make sense to the greatest number of people on that committee. But but from your point of view, and you're an experienced person in this business, and I'm not trying to second guess anybody, but I'm just saying, what's your thought about that?
Well, they did extensive research. They ran time for call history at all the different locations, and they seriously looked at it, and they found that putting people in one central station versus a different one wasn't going to have a significant time response difference. From my point of view, having everybody in one spot gives you a lot more flexibility on who you send where. So rather than having one person end up in this station and one in another station, all your leftover people are in one station. You could utilize them more effectively. So, I mean, the best option, if we could hit every spot on the island from one point, that would be the most effective option. That's not an option for us, unfortunately. I don't know. I could see both points of view, honestly. I don't think having the station is worse than having 2 stations, but I came into this process halfway through. We've already spent, I don't know, $1.5 million. We spent a significant amount of money on this project as designed, as intended. If we go back to the drawing board, it's thrown out the window, and we're talking a couple of years from now, and the building costs the way they're going, we could end up spending more money for less station, which would be disappointing.
Great, thank you. Any other, Joe?
The question, so what happens if, in terms of there is no motion, but,
Yeah.
so if we vote to approve the transfer, the project moves ahead, and the town moves the money around so that if we say no, what happens?
Like, what?
And the bids run out, then what's that? So
Well, not
then it
necessarily. I mean,
automatically goes to rebid?
the town could look around for $141,000 elsewhere. That doesn't require our approval. Just as they did for the balance of the 1.2 or 1.3. I mean, they found it, Brian's found, known savings from other line items and accounts. So,
Not sure that, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure there's any money floating around that doesn't need some approval for transfer.
it doesn't need our approval.
I'm not really sure that we would be able to find the 141,000 anywhere. That's not allocated for something or anticipated at this point, or would be. I would have the authority to be able to just pledge against this project until town meeting, to be quite frank with you.
So
I've not done a full in-depth analysis of everything, but I don't think that there's anything that we could pledge against this without, because I couldn't transfer it to the capital projects fund. With a successful reserve fund transfer, I have the authorization to spend the money out of the capital projects fund, because that's where we're asking for it to be put. Everything else would require me to transfer it there to appropriately and accurately account for it, and I wouldn't be able to do that. So if it wasn't successful here, I don't know that we could move forward. The bids would expire, and we'd incur all the costs to requalify everybody and do that, and hope and pray that they come in lower, although I don't know that they will or they won't.
Another sort of naive question, what are the odds we go forward with a transfer, the project goes forward at $18 million. Are there steps or actions that either the OPM or the town can take to sort of, after you've hired this particular contractor, to actually sort of force or enforce cost savings sort of going forward? As a, in other words,
No, it's a great question.
Go forward, because we don't want to take the risk of going out to rebid, but you can contract with them. What can you do to try to reduce the cost once you've hired somebody?
We spoke about that with the selectmen's meeting. One of the big areas to look at would be the site. In speaking to the general contractor who would get this job, he basically said one of the most expensive pieces was the paving. The paving was about $290 a ton on the island here, as opposed to, I think it's $70, let's say, over in New Bedford. So what do? Don't pave. We could do a portion of the parking lot in a, crushed stone, gravel. Again, maintenance issues along the way, but we are looking seriously at the site. Once he's under contract, once we get our legs under us, put a proposal request out to credit some of those items, and look for a less expensive. Again, it's not in the building, at that point. And the site items aren't filed sub-bid oriented for the most part. They're all in his pocket of the bid. It's none of these folks for the most part. So yes, we're looking to try to find some savings once we get started, so that 1.228 overage, if we can shrink it, obviously it's better for everybody.
And I take it you can't refuse a sub-bid. You sort of have to take the whole package.
Got to take the whole package. Can't negotiate. Can't bid shop is what the Attorney General calls it. Can't do it. So you take everyone as a group, take with the GC, go from there. We have to be careful about even having these conversations with the contractor, before they're under contract. But yes, we can certainly, and we are planning on doing that, just to buy us some breathing room.
Who says we can't shop a sub bid? Where's that? Is that a regulation? Or?
Oh, it's Chapter 149.
It's a state regulation.
State reg. Procurement laws. The filed sub bids come in. They will pay you for the low. If the GC wants to carry the guy that's higher, he can. But usually everyone else is carrying the low number. So unless they're very close, no GC carries the second place electrician or the third place plumber, because they'll probably lose the job by it. At the end of the day, bids a lot of times are a little bit
by state law,
closer.
what you're saying is by state law, we can't do it anyway.
Can't do it.
If we wanted to do it, we couldn't do it.
Correct. This is the big difference between public and private. You know,
Yeah.
building a private
A lot of
job.
differences.
Oh yeah, private job. You know, you go to a GC that has their team.
Double the cost.
That has their team. Absolutely. Can't do it.
What's the paving portion? How much?
Only because the contractor told us the paving was about $650 for that parking lot. Fencing about $200,000. So we were looking at those two items right off the bat as something we could do something with. You know, we could take them out, possibly rebid them later under the town's paving contract, at least save the markup. 10% markup on $650,000 is $65,000. You know, if we could, you know, and it's something we don't need to make a decision on now. Job starts, take it back, lower that threshold a little bit. Obviously, you're always be fighting against the price of petroleum. If gas spikes and you've taken it out of the job, you're running the risk of, you know, it costing you more later. But again, that's why we were looking at some other kind of pervious surface, you know, as an option. But again, we would need to discuss that. Maintenance, maybe the outer part of a parking lot. You know, you certainly wouldn't want to do it on the drive paths where any of the trucks are going to go, because you just break it down and end up with large ruts. But the site was an area that we identified as being able to maybe do some cost savings post-contracting.
Great. Any other questions for these gentlemen?
I got a lot of questions, but they're not going to be answered here.
So, committee, what's any thoughts?
Yeah, my thought is that we got way too far down the road planning a building that was never the most cost-effective way to solve the issue of needing a new station.
Yep. I agree.
I think we told ourselves and we told the taxpayers long ago that we were going to take a hard look at how we could do this for the lowest dollar amount without sacrificing anything. And I don't think we did.
We
I think
failed.
we looked at, I think you said, we nibbled around the edges. We didn't look at the whole thing the way we should have.
So that's obviously a failure in process and something that potentially can be captured and rolled forward. It doesn't answer our question unless our decision is that we think that they ought to go back and totally rethink this.
Well, I don't think we can make that decision. We can't tell them to do that. I mean, my vote's not going to be to transfer this $142,000, but we can't, you know, we're not in a position to say that they need to redesign the whole building. If you know, the Board of Selectmen wants to put it back out to bid with the same design and hope that we get new bidders, I'm very confident that we'll get at least one more bidder, being J.K. Scanlon. Hopefully, Marin Construction can get their act together with DCAM and rebid also. I think it's at least a reasonable chance that I think it's a good chance that we come in with new bidders.
The selectmen have already decided not to, though, right? They want to accept this contract, and they would, I presume, prefer that we transfer the money, or approve the transfer of the money.
I think we should make our own decision independently of what they've done.
I recognize that, but that their decision has been to go forward.
That is correct. And what Brian's saying is if we do not approve the transfer, ipso facto, we're saying at least rebid it, if not relook it.
Or I'm going to have a lot of sleepless nights between now and a day or two to try to figure something out, which I don't know if we can.
So when our last chairman was here, he used to remind us all that we worked for town meeting. And when town meeting approved this money initially, they were told that we were going to look for ways to save money. And then they approved more money after we went to market and determined the cost were higher. But we, as a committee, and among that group of people in front of the audience, we made the commitment that this was it. You know, the extra $2 million was it. And people approved the money. That wasn't the case. You know, now this small group of people is going to make this decision to spend this extra money. I'm not sure that's appropriate. You know, I hear that we're trying to match the fit and feel of this building. That wasn't part of the discussion in 2015. You know, that wasn't part of what we were trying to do. We were trying to create a building where we could hold all the apparatus that needed to be held and meet state and federal codes for sleeping facilities and had capacity for emergency personnel to come over here in times of need. I didn't hear anything about fit and feel and needing to, you know, have the more expensive HVAC system because we wanted to be green, or I didn't hear any of that.
I didn't either. Having been on this committee for a long time, I wasn't privy to the discussions around the police station because my first year on there was when it was already rolling forward. But having said that, I can tell you right now, I feel like I personally have failed the taxpayer. I mean, if I had to give you, tell you what I think, that's how I feel about it. Because just looking at what we're looking at today, and just through a very minimal discussion, we haven't done our job. I don't know any other way to put it. Now the question is, what do we do? Can you undo it? Can you know, I don't know.
I think we've just been subjected to time, place, and circumstance where it's a different world than it was 7 years ago. It's become tougher and tougher, and it seemed to be between a rock and a hard place. And do we try to go back?
Geez, all our neighbors did be in the same world.
And it's just, by personal experience, I've realized it's getting harder and more expensive every day, especially when it comes to municipal finance and building those buildings. And if I wish I could figure out if we went back and rebid it, we're going to be successful, or it's just going to cost more money.
Well, but that's the real question, though, isn't it? Is if we can rebid, because that's not our decision. We're going to tell them right now that, all right, you're going to fall short and you can't proceed. So now the car is effectively out of gas, but that doesn't mean they're going to go and do something differently. I mean, if we put the same bid out, then just what they're saying, money's on the table, and maybe we get another bidder. Maybe it saves a little bit of money, but does that cover the expenses of the whole process of recertification? You know, all that, all these things that they're telling us they, you know, basically would rather not do, and will time and money. So that, because that's not, we can't tell them to rebid. That's just what we'd hope they would do.
The selectmen that made the decision, they rather not take that risk.
Yeah, but we're just saying we would hope that they would redesign, you know, for a better scope and of the project, and not for it to be as expensive and, you know, have all the bells and whistles as the town building. But they're not obligated to do that. If I'm
I
understanding
would
it.
feel comfortable saying our recommendation would be
Right.
to really
Okay.
overhaul this. The selectmen are free to do whatever they want.
Right.
Now, David, I agree with you that we should deliberate independent of whatever the Board of Selectmen did. But I also think we should note that the Board of Selectmen didn't have all the information, all these numbers, all these comparative costs to the neighboring towns' facilities. They didn't have that information when they took their vote.
That I can verify. Yeah. I mean, I'm in favor of a new a new fire station. Have been for the 2 years that I've been on the FinCom. You know, and I certainly recognize all the information shared by Vertex, and you know that the world is changing, the expenses are going up. I just find it astounding that, you know, they've, in effect, the project has come back now twice asking for more money.
And
I
actually,
disagree with you, John, that we haven't done our job, but we certainly look like we haven't done our job. I'm not sure in political
Perception.
terms. Perception is reality, right?
So, but just getting back to that, so you guys have actually, is there any way they can ask for more money? I mean, can we be sitting here again?
Oh, sure.
I mean, 9 months ago, I'm looking at the meeting minutes now. 9 months ago, I made the motion to recommend to town meeting that we approve the extra $2 million. But that was, based on the testimony that we got, that we went to market, we found the prices, and this was the amount that we needed.
Correction,
And it wasn't.
please verify. I don't think we went to market. We just, Vertex saw the, I think, you're doing the project in Situate.
I remember the slide specifically. We used some comparison pricing based on some projects we knew, some projects KVA knew, some projects their estimator knew. And
So-
we put the square foot pricing for those prices up there. We took the high one, which was our Situate project. We added 30% to it, and that's how we got to the 650 per square foot construction target.
I apologize. It reads here, bids are coming in between $400 and $600 per foot, but I guess
Yeah,
I understand.
No worries. Bids were coming in on other
projects.
but not this one, because at that time the project was only at design development. It wasn't ready to go on the street yet. It only went to bid in March of this year. The plans hit the street. April, and we got bids in June.
And if we approve this, everything goes forward, how quickly do we have a new police station? Or a new fire station? How quickly does this thing get put up?
Again, bids go stale on Friday. Contractor would have
Right,
contract.
if we approve the money now,
You would see groundbreaking third week of. You probably see groundbreaking right after Labor Day.
and how long does it take to finish?
It's a 12 to 14 month process.
And Chief, what's the state of our response times now? I mean, are we talking about a detriment to public safety if we?
The response times don't change according to the analyst report that we got.
But is this something? Obviously, we have an old fire station. Are we putting the public in danger by rebidding and delaying this an extra year? No, I mean seriously. That's
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, is that how it's going to be perceived? Is that what's
No,
going to go
let's
on
find
here?
out.
Let's.
No, you're not putting the public in danger.
Okay.
I mean, the facility we have is way smaller than we should be operating out of. We have a hard time doing training. We can't keep all our vehicles inside. The trucks are sometimes less than a foot apart from each other inside, which isn't safe. But it doesn't change our response times dramatically going here or there.
Yep.
I would never say the public is unsafe because you
Yeah.
feel that this is the right thing for the town. That would not be the case at all.
No, I just want to know if
No,
this is
no,
a
no one
public
would ever
safety
say that. That's not the case.
All right.
It's a good question.
I vote to. I would say we recommend to rebid.
No, somebody want to make a motion? Are we ready to make a motion, or do you want to have some more discussion? It's the pleasure of the committee. Motion, discussion. We haven't got one yet.
It just seems like the other than the HVAC, we did come in somewhat close to our estimate. I mean, other than the guy gouging us with the HVAC system, seems to be an unfortunate part of it.
One thing, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. John brought up one other issue. Equal quarters from male and female. We have a female that is going to the floor. She was a fire inspector. She's going to be a captain. She'll be working 24-hour shifts. It is impossible in the building we have to give her equal quarters. I don't think she's going to sue us. I don't think we're going to end up in court, but we're going to do the best we can. We're moving desks and things out into the hallways, but that's something that we need to deal with sooner rather than later. But no, it does not affect response times or safety.
Yeah. Okay.
So you want a motion, David? Move that we approve the transfer of, whatever the number is, $170,000.
$141,860. I'm not going to go for the other one. I'll hopefully have you approve that one.
So,
For the 100 and,
$141,860 is the amount needed.
all right, I move that we approve the transfer of $141,860 as suggested by Ryan.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Beyond what we've had?
I'll just say that I empathize with anybody who feels that this is something we need to do for the community and we've put it off for too long, but I don't think that's a good reason to move forward.
Well, I hear you, and I find myself flipping and flopping in my own mind as to which way to vote on this, but, and I don't mean to say that $1 million isn't a lot of money, but, the time value of delaying this and the risk of rebidding it I think is significant. And
So what if we
the
weren't
odds of
talking about
coming
$1
back
million?
and, unless we go back and rebid, and get a modular building at $8 million, which is a risk in and of itself.
Even if it's 12, I mean, even if it's back to 15, I mean, we're talking about real money, and there's no reason to think that it would come in anywhere near 15. Even if it was bid a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago even, the facility that's the same size, has 5 bunks instead of 7, has the same apparatus space, is built by, the GC was a contractor who does a lot of work here, presumably would bid it. We could literally look in a book, I think we were just told, and get that same model and put it right here. I think that's worth talking about, especially if we're going to be talking about new facilities, new smaller satellite stations around town. We all know that there's a lot of other capital projects that need money.
Question, what would it, no changes in any of the plans, as I recall, sort of listening to the audio in the selectmen's meeting, it was under $100,000 to requalify again and rebid. No changes in the plans?
Well under.
Yeah, so,
It's just it's the time. So basically, it's really the time of doing the pre-qualification. So it's a couple, 2-3 weeks of a person in our firm, a person in the architect's firm to put it back on the street. And the architect has some edits to the drawings, obviously, and the plans to update dates and contracts and those kind of things. The process would probably add 4 weeks. 2 weeks to advertise the pre-qualification, 2 to 3 weeks to assess it, that's 5, and then another 5 for the bid, 5 or 6. So we had said about, I think, 3 months at the selectmen's meeting. It's about a 3 month from now to then, 3 months. We would be giving more numbers.
so there is, and there's obviously risk that the absolute numbers would go up. If we're able to get additional competition, that presumably would be a good thing in terms of, keeping people reasonably honest. I mean, is it reasonable to sort of think about 2 tracks on this? One which is, at the very least, rebid it with more competition, but at the same time engage in a discussion about and explore whether going to something that's modular, that has the potential to have significant cost reductions, and make that decision. I have no idea how long it would take to come to a decision like that. Presumably, you don't have to go out and necessarily design everything again.
Yeah.
I mean, is that, do we have a 2-pronged approach here to?
I think there's a lot of merit to that idea.
We'd have to redesign the building. I don't know KBA's experience with modular, I'd be frank with you. So they may be the wrong firm to tell you.
So when you buy,
that way.
and maybe it's not the same way with public buildings, but when you buy a Huntington home or a Kaiser building, they have their own architects and engineers in-house, so you
It
do
would be
look.
similar.
Yeah.
It would be similar. We would have to give them a rough spec
Right.
with that, again, baseline level schematic, which we obviously have. We have a pretty detailed,
Right.
we have construction plans.
I hope so.
And site drawings, we have those too. So you put those out there and say, here's what we're looking to do, guys. What can you do for us modular? I mean, that's and then you are correct. Then the question of who designs what would have to be kind of worked out. It's KBA's plans or for now, but you're right. There's an in-house person who does a lot of that design, and then you kind of have to marry them up because you've got someone else's site plan, they're contracted with someone else. I mean, we could get through all that.
And we're not tied up with KBA through some state contract type of, it's a contract between the town of Nantucket and KBA?
Correct.
Okay.
And they're about to enter the construction administration phase. They just finished the building phase. Their contract is broken into
I thought you guys did that.
schematic. Excuse me?
You guys don't do the construction administration for us?
We're your OPM on site. Their construction administration phase is reviewing shop drawings and submittals. This is Jim. Jim was our guy on site. He's our clerk.
He's Castle Booze's clerk or your? Okay.
The evaluation phase is really approval of samples, shop drawings,
Okay.
steel shops, those kind of things.
Yeah.
The technical aspect of the project, and we're the practical
Mhm.
aspect of the project.
Okay.
I mean, I just feel like there's two ways to go about this. The first is to just get this over with and move forward and not have to sit here again about, maybe,
we'll be
well,
back
no, I mean,
here anyway.
well, yeah, on this subject, but to take the lessons from it and not have this type of information be given to us literally less than a week before these bids expire so people can make informed decisions. Or, is that something that can be accomplished? And so we don't, when we go look at another capital project, we're not.
Well, I think
Caught
once
with
the
a foot in our
bids come
mouth.
back in, they're not valid for 30 or 60 days. I mean, this,
It's 45 calendar days is statute, so it works out to 30 working days.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, this project didn't just start, a year ago. It's been going on for maybe a decade, where it got cut off, and then we submitted, and it's been several times that I've been on the committee that it's been brought back again. So, and we've had committees that I've been on that did all the evaluation of satellites, and which was secondary to having a main structure. So, I don't know. I don't like it any more than anyone else. The expense and how it changes, but I don't think it's just going to get any cheaper.
Well, unless you go
I think
the
there's
modular,
reason to believe
make
that
a
it could.
dramatic way in the way the building
I
is.
mean, we're not just crossing our fingers and taking a leap to say that there are ways we can make this building less expensive and still just as good, just as functional, have all the bells and whistles that we need. I mean, again, I don't know what look and feel mean or fit and feel, but it can have everything that building has, same square footage and everything.
So let me offer something up, Brian, when you get as a discussion point. What if we approve the transfer, subject to a discussion with the selectmen about the appetite for seriously re-looking at how this building is put together? Just because we approved the transfer doesn't mean that the contract has to be signed. But if the contract ultimately is not signed, then the transfer, I presume, is null and void.
Transfer would go through, and then we'd have to.
Transfer it back.
I mean,
So
there's-
could we
there's
speak
like-
Wednesday on things not on the agenda, or it's too late for that?
I mean, there's risk doing it. I don't know. I mean, we'd have to.
I mean, it seems to me that we all get the risk of rebidding this.
Well,
And-
even looking at modular runs a risk because we still have a lot of filed sub-bids that we have to redo again because everything expires and, we could end up with a second or third person in a filed sub-bid down the line, which we could end up pushing this project more money than we were. I mean, we run a risk doing either one.
No, but I guess what I'm suggesting is there a way to sort of thread this needle, which is to give approval today
Yeah.
with the idea that there would be a discussion with the selectmen, and it would probably have to be a discussion on Wednesday night or a non-open meeting type, where we have to get it posted, because I don't think we have time to post it. And get the appetite for whether the selectmen would kick this back to just do a serious relook at it. And if they say no, we don't want to do a serious relook, we think the risk is too much, then it is what it is. And the thing goes through and you sign the contract. If they say,
So we have to sign.
So we have to sign the contract by Friday.
Yeah.
So, I mean, realistically, I suppose we could reach out to the town manager to reach out to them and see if they had any appetite for a discussion on Thursday. We could add it to your agenda from the meeting that we posted, because I think it still would be within the time frame to do. But we're, I certainly do understand what everybody's saying, and there's a risk no matter what we do. If we decide to go modular, like I said, we still have filed sub-bids, we still have design to do for whatever portion is not modular, unless it all was, but we could end up with a second or third or whatever bidder in the filed sub-bids, or less bidders than we had at more money. So we certainly do run a risk of doing it. I'm not advocating one way or the other at all. I'm just saying that we have, there's risk. There's no guarantee that doing a modular is going to save money. I understand that it may, and I don't discount that. But we could be back here for a much different sum of money all over again that's vastly different than what everybody's talking about right now. That's the
Well,
only...
it's not going to be significantly higher.
I don't know what it'll be. I can't promise you that.
No, I'm not asking you to promise.
You know,
but
I mean,
realistically,
it could be. I mean, it could be less. It could be more.
Stick-built construction is not going to be more. Is going to be more expensive
Yeah.
than modular construction. The question is whether the opportunity here is sufficient to take the risk, and what.
I think you just said it. The risk is not in the cost. It's whether voters will approve it or people decide they want to take the time to look at designing a modular building.
Yeah,
I mean, it will be less expensive. It can be as big. It can be as functional. Do people want to spend the time to do it? I'm not going to vote to spend the money that taxpayers said they did not want to spend just because the number came in higher, when I'm not sure we looked hard enough at what another alternative was. A real alternative that works, meets all codes, and exists 20 miles to our west. I'm not willing to appropriate those funds.
All right, so your suggestion again was to,
And we'd have to go back to Mr. Grouse to probably change his. What I was suggesting is or trying to figure out, is there a way to sort of do this, get the read from the selectmen? I mean, notwithstanding, and I have to applaud Stephen for all the work he's done, and I wish there were. I mean, it's been somewhat of a pet issue for me for a number of years on this committee, which is that we don't have processes to take care of this kind of stuff, and wishing and hoping that we do this better next time, absent some change, is going to produce the same result. So I don't know how we.
Right.
I don't know
and
how
the time
we
to talk about process for next time is when we're doing the next thing. We're still doing this thing. We didn't spend this money yet. We don't have to, just because. There's always another Friday. There's always a new deadline. It could be 90 days from now. We could be back doing it again in 90 days. But at least we would have thought about what another option is that I think we all agree is very likely to save a lot of money.
So is the procedural issue for me to have a vote on my motion, or for me to withdraw it and have, not, if my motion's defeated, it's this.
Yeah. So
do you wanna call a vote, David?
being a newbie at the parliamentary rules here, and we don't have Libby here to help us. We'll
if we hold a
dispense
vote
with
and it
some
loses,
format. It's over.
Yeah.
It means effectively that I probably have a couple sleepless nights to figure out if the selectmen want to continue pushing forward, because they did vote for the contract. They did vote for it. So, I mean, it would mean ultimately either I can find the money, which I'm not entirely sure, as I've represented to you that I can, or I can't. I mean, absent this. I mean, this was the...
I think this is a big, saying no is a big risk, but sort of listening to some of Stephen's arguments, and the fact of the matter is, how often does a public body like this finally say no?
Yep.
We haven't for a long time.
yeah, and it's one thing, the money always obviously is very important, but at the same time, I think the public has continuously wanted a new fire station and the services it brings, and so that, as David said, we have to reinvent the way we do things, and more of a working environment with the selectmen and the finance committee, which I've asked for years. But anyhow,
Well, wouldn't a no vote send a message to do that?
well, to the taxpayer that wants a new fire station, you send a message that what are you doing?
I personally think that the public has some sentiment against people continuously spending more money than they say they're going to, especially on this building. I mean, I know that there's a good amount of people upset about that. There's a lot of, and like Steven said too, there's a lot of other capital projects. I mean, we got a lot of stuff going on. Public safety is not an issue. I mean, if I had the fire chief over here telling us that, yes, you're putting people in danger, that we can't get, our stuff is rusting outside and it's not going to last long enough. But he's not saying that. He's saying that everything's fine and that there's a few things that could be better, but it's not like our fire station's crumbling.
No,
So
it is.
Well, I didn't hear him say it's fine.
is
I mean,
fine.
Yeah.
we definitely
I don't want to
need
make a
new
public
building.
statement
No,
like
I
that.
know that,
It's
but-
time to move on.
Yeah, but the change, for delaying 9 months, if we're delaying a year even, and saving a lot of money that can be used for other important projects. I mean,
This can't be used for any other project.
no, but the borrowing capacity can. We're going to go back to the town and say, now we want a satellite station, or now we need to fund sewers, or now we need to do something else. It's all coming out of the same checkbook for the taxpayers.
All right. You want to call? You ready?
Yep.
We'll start over with you, Henry.
No.
No.
Stephen? John? Vote on Joe's motion to approve the transfer.
No.
I vote yes.
No.
Well, the noes have it, so we're not going to approve the transfer.
Well, so now, do we need to make a motion that we're not going to do it?
No, you just voted.
We just voted.
Did it.
Well, we defeated my motion to approve it, so.
Yeah.
Same thing, isn't it?
Okay. So now, we obviously owe some conversation to town management and/or the selectmen. So, which probably is a
So we have a meeting scheduled for, is it Thursday?
Thursday.
So certainly we can invite anyone and also make ourselves available at Board of Selectmen meeting if they'd like us to be there.
Can you amend our agenda for Thursday to
I'll include a
say,
berating.
Do we want to make be proactive and be on, if we can't get on the agenda, step up at the beginning of the meeting and make it part of it?
public comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would be where I would suggest that we probably enter.
Citizens comment?
For the selectmen's meeting?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the only way we could do that for Wednesday, tomorrow night.
Okay.
But we have a meeting scheduled for Thursday ourselves, which we could invite the selectmen to. Well, I thank you guys for coming and helping us work through this. Stephen, thank you very much you've done a lot of work, and personally, to me, this is the kind of work that needs to be, I would like to see more of our committee do, because this is, it's fairly, it's not fairly important, it's very important. And I think maybe, and Cliff, to answer your question, Kelly and I have talked about doing some joint meetings together, so we will make that happen. We don't have anything scheduled yet, but it'll probably after the summer. We'll try to get that going, but I think the other piece of it is to see if we can, in fact, get a process and figure out how to do this. So, A, we're not jammed at the end, and these things. I mean, we all know what happens. I mean, this project came up. It's like a lot of projects. The town doesn't necessarily have all the bandwidth and the resources to put people on it, to drive it. We turn it over to the architects. They go and, interview the folks at, the fire station or whatever about what they want. You get this building, and then nobody really, even though, the documents back from the 14 town meeting talk very specifically about going through and value engineering. It really ended up, nobody really thought much about this
the
project
architect's
differently.
not incentivized to look at
Well, yeah.
a modular building. That's,
No.
that's it. Before we had Vertex on the job, it was KBA.
Yep.
So maybe that's something to consider. You know, that might have been where we got off the rails from the get-go.
Okay.
Got a question that's somewhat germane, and that is the selection of the OPM. How does that? How do we go about that?
We put out a request for qualification.
Pardon?
Put out a request for qualification,
Okay.
and we submit those, and then there's a panel that reviews them and interviews them and makes a determination.
Okay. So you basically go out for bid for the OPMs. I mean, if I was the OPM, I'd feel very uneasy at this point. Why? Because I'd feel like I failed, quite frankly.
Not because of this meeting.
No,
No.
just because of the circumstances. Yeah. I don't feel like we've been, and maybe I could be wrong, I just don't feel like we've been served well. And maybe it goes back to the architect. I can tell you one thing that I know in the private business, I was responsible either directly or indirectly for no less than 8 plants that were built. We never used an architect once because we found that early on that using architects added at least 20% to the cost, just in general. It didn't bring anything to the table.
I don't think they do, but under state law, I think they make it.
Well, you got to have an engineer stamp, which an architect
check.
has, but it doesn't
No, you got an
need to
engineer
be
stamp, you
somebody
have to have a
designing a
PE.
palace, especially
Have a
when we have
PE.
the HTC to design it for us after
Anyway.
the fact.
Gotta have a PE. You
Okay.
don't have to have an architect.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Aye. Thank you very much. Remind you that we have a meeting at 4 o'clock on Thursday, and hope to see you all